You have exactly 1 hour to shut this down, or I'm calling the sheriff on your own family. That's what Karen Wexler screamed at me in my own driveway in front of my kids over a plate of grilled corn. I didn't call the sheriff. I didn't back down either. But before I tell you how 40 of my neighbors ended up standing in my backyard holding paper plates like it was a small act of rebellion, you need to understand exactly who Karen Wexler is, and exactly what she'd already put me through. My name doesn't matter much for this story, so just call me Dave. I've lived on Larkspur Court in Maple Ridge Estates for 6 years. It's the kind of neighborhood you'd put in a real estate brochure: matching mailboxes, trimmed hedges, a community pond with 2 sad ducks nobody named. My wife Rachel and I bought our house because of the backyard. Big oak tree in the corner, a stretch of grass wide enough for our 2 kids to actually run in, and just enough privacy fencing to make Saturday afternoons feel like hours. Every 3rd Saturday of the month, from April through September, I fire up the grill. It started small, just us, maybe the Petersons next door. Over the years it grew: ribs on the smoker by 10 in the morning, corn husking on the porch, a cooler of drinks that neighbors just started adding to, unprompted, like it was tradition now. By last summer, my barbecue was pulling 15, sometimes 20 people. Kids doing cannonballs in the Petersons' inflatable pool next door. Bad music, good food, the kind of ordinary joy you don't think to protect until someone tries to take it from you. We knew every family on that street by name, which dog belonged to which house, which kid was allergic to what. It's the kind of familiarity you don't realize you value until somebody starts treating it like a liability instead of a neighborhood. Karen Wexler moved into 14 Larkspur Court 2 years ago. Within a month, she was HOA president. Nobody remembers actually voting for her. The previous president, an easygoing retiree named Frank, moved to Arizona, and Karen simply filled the seat at the next meeting like she'd been appointed by some higher authority. She wore a visor even indoors. She carried a clipboard to the mailbox. And she developed almost immediately a very specific interest in my backyard. The first complaint came on a Tuesday in May, not from a neighbor, from Karen, a laminated notice taped to my front door at 7 a.m. citing excessive noise and airborne particulate matter from a barbecue that had ended by my own phone's timestamp at 8:47 the previous evening. I remember reading it twice, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. I want you to sit with that phrase for a second: airborne particulate matter. That's smoke. She wrote an official HOA violation about smoke from a grill in a residential backyard, zoned, insured, and about 40 feet from her own back door, a detail that would matter a lot more later. I laughed it off. Rachel didn't. She dealt with Karen at the mailbox a week earlier, gotten a lecture about our trash cans being visible 11 minutes past the designated collection window. Rachel has a good read on people, and her exact words to me were, "This one's going to be a problem." I told her Karen would lose interest by June. I was wrong in a way that would take the entire summer to prove. That first laminated notice was just the opening move. What came next wasn't a warning anymore. It was a threat with a dollar amount attached, and it landed on a Saturday I will never forget. By the second barbecue in June, Karen had upgraded from laminated notes to certified mail. The envelope arrived on a Thursday, 3 days before my planned Saturday cookout, and Rachel found it wedged half out of our mailbox like Karen wanted us to see it from the street. Inside was a formal HOA violation letter, HOA letterhead and all, citing Section 4. 2 of our community bylaws, regulation of outdoor cooking apparatus and associated nuisances, and a fine, $200 for the May barbecue, retroactively. I called the HOA office that afternoon. A woman named Priscilla, clearly exhausted, told me Karen had pushed the fine through as an emergency board action, which apparently didn't require the usual 72-hour notice to homeowners. I asked what specific bylaw limited grill usage. Priscilla put me on hold for 4 minutes and came back with an answer that told me everything. Mrs. Wexler is looking into the exact language. There was no exact language. I'd find that out for certain a few weeks later. But even without proof, something in Karen's urgency told me this had stopped being about smoke a long time ago. I paid the $200 anyway that first time because I genuinely believed fighting a $200 fine over a barbecue wasn't worth the headache. I want you to remember that decision, because it's the exact decision Karen was counting on every single homeowner making. Pay it, avoid the confrontation, move on with your life. It's a strategy that only works if nobody ever compares notes, and nobody ever had until that summer. Rachel wasn't ready to just move on, though. She started keeping a small notebook by the coffee maker, dates, times, exactly what Karen said at the mailbox, exactly what the laminated notices claimed. I thought it was overkill at the time. 3 weeks later, that notebook would matter more than either of us expected. I decided to test the theory. That Saturday, I scaled the barbecue back smaller grill, 6 people, done cooking by 6 p.m., cleaned up by 6:45. Nothing that could remotely qualify as a nuisance under any reasonable definition. Karen was at my fence line by 6:52, clipboard in hand, taking photographs of my grill while it was literally cold. When I walked over and asked her calmly what exactly she was documenting, she said, and I quote, "precedent." Then she told me, unprompted, that she'd noticed my youngest daughter's bicycle had been left in the driveway past acceptable evening hours, and that would be a separate matter for a separate letter. That's when Rachel started talking to the neighbors. Not to complain, to ask a simple question. Had Karen ever done anything like this to anyone else? The answer, it turned out, was yes. Repeatedly. And the stories that came back over the next 2 weeks were about to change everything about how I approached this fight. Deborah from 22, Larkspur told Rachel about a wind chime Karen had reported as a noise disturbance. A wind chime that belonged to Deborah's late husband, mounted on their porch for 11 years without a single complaint until Karen moved in. The Ferreros at number 9 had been fined $300 for a garden gnome collection Karen labeled unsanctioned lawn ornamentation, a rule that existed nowhere in the actual bylaws, which Mr. Ferrero had specifically checked. And the Petersons, my next-door neighbors, the ones whose kids swam in my pool every summer, had quietly stopped hosting their own July 4th party 2 years running specifically, because Karen had threatened to report their fireworks display to the fire marshal despite it being fully legal, permitted, and 40 yards from any structure. One name kept surfacing more than any other. A man named Gerald, 3 streets over, who'd apparently gone head-to-head with Karen the previous summer over a detached shed and had somehow mysteriously won. Rachel got his number. I called him that same night, sitting alone in my garage so the kids wouldn't hear the conversation get heated, and what Gerald told me completely reframed the fight I thought I was in. Gerald had done something I hadn't even considered. He'd requested Maple Ridge Estate's official governing documents, the CC&RS, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, directly from the county recorder's office, not from the HOA itself. Because in most states, Karen told me, HOA boards cannot legally withhold or selectively enforce rules that aren't written into those recorded documents. If it's not in the CC&RS, it's not enforceable, full stop, regardless of what a laminated notice says. I requested our CC&RS the very next morning. It took 11 days to arrive. 11 days during which Karen escalated twice more, once with a formal cease and desist letter for unauthorized assembly exceeding 8 non-resident individuals, and once with a threat delivered verbally at the mailbox that she'd have my recurring gathering permit revoked. A permit that, as far as I could tell, had never existed in the first place. I want to be honest about something, those 11 days weren't easy. Rachel and I had a real argument that week, the kind that has nothing to do with the actual topic. She thought I should escalate immediately, call a lawyer, make it official. I thought that would just make Karen dig in harder before I even had proof. We went back and forth over dinner one night while the kids ate quietly, watching their parents disagree about a barbecue like it was the most important thing in the world, which, in a strange way, by that point it kind of was. When the documents finally landed in my inbox as a PDF from the county office, I sat at my kitchen table at 11 at night and read all 41 pages twice. Section 4. 2. The exact clause Karen had cited on my very first fine said nothing about grills, smoke, noise, or barbecues. It governed exterior paint colors, that was it. Karen hadn't misquoted the bylaws. She de-invented a violation from a section that had absolutely nothing to do with the thing she was fining me for. I sat with that for a long moment because I finally understood something important. Karen wasn't enforcing rules. She was performing authority nobody had actually given her, and she was betting correctly for 2 straight years that nobody would ever bother to check. I printed 3 copies of the relevant CC&R pages. I highlighted Section 4.2 in yellow. And I scheduled my next backyard barbecue for the following Saturday, the 3rd one of the summer, same time as always, but this time I invited every single neighbor Rachel had spoken to. Deborah, the Ferreros, the Petersons. Gerald drove over from 3 streets away just to be there. I also very deliberately mailed a certified letter of my own to Karen and to every member of the HOA board, requesting a formal review of Section 4.2 and every fine issued under it for the past 2 years, effective immediately. That Saturday morning, before a single guest arrived, I walked the yard one more time with Rachel, checking the grill placement, the folder of documents sitting ready on the porch table under a paperweight so it wouldn't blow away. She squeezed my hand and said, "You don't have to do anything dramatic, just tell the truth when she gets here." I remember thinking that was easier said than done, standing in a backyard I'd already been fined for twice. By 3:30, the yard was full. Gerald's truck was parked at the curb. Deborah had brought a tray of deviled eggs she insisted on setting right next to the grill for good luck. The Ferreros arrived with their kids and notably one small ceramic gnome tucked under Mr. Ferrero's arm, which he set on my porch railing without a word like a small flag planted before battle. Nobody said out loud what everyone already understood: this barbecue wasn't just a barbecue anymore. Karen showed up Saturday at 4:15 p.m. 45 minutes into the party without her clipboard for once, just her phone already recording. "This ends now," she said, loud enough for the whole yard to hear. "I have every right to shut this gathering down under community bylaws." I'd been waiting 3 weeks for that exact sentence. I walked to the porch table, picked up the folder Rachel and I had prepared and handed her the first page. "Section 4.2, I said. "Exterior paint, go ahead, read it out loud for everyone." She didn't take the page. Deborah did instead and read it aloud herself, clear and unhurried, while 40 people went completely silent around the grill. Karen's face did something I'd genuinely never seen before, a kind of controlled panic dressed up as irritation. "That's not the current version," she said. I handed her the county recorder's stamp on the bottom of the page. "Certified, dated, timestamped that same week." "It's the only version," I said. "It's the only one that's ever existed." That's when Gerald stepped forward and things got a lot more interesting for Karen, a lot faster than she expected. Gerald didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply said, "I have 11 months of records showing you fined me for a shed that was fully permitted, using a bylaw section that governs mailbox height." Then Deborah spoke, wind chime story and all. Then Mr. Ferrero holding up a photo of his gnomes on his phone like evidence at a trial. Then, quietest of all, the Petersons, who admitted, in front of everyone, that they'd canceled their own family tradition for 2 years because of threats that had no legal basis whatsoever. Karen stood in the middle of my backyard, phone still recording, and realized in real time that she wasn't confronting one homeowner. She was standing in a circle of every person she'd spent 2 years quietly steamrolling, and every one of them had finally compared notes. I asked her one direct question calmly in front of everyone. "Karen, can you show me right now the specific bylaw that limits residential grill usage?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. 40 seconds of silence in a backyard full of people is a genuinely long time, and I let every second of it breathe. She left without answering. Walked straight to her car, didn't look back, didn't say another word. The party didn't stop. If anything, it got louder, not out of spite, but relief. The specific kind of relief that comes when a fear you've been carrying quietly for years turns out to have never had any teeth at all. The formal review I'd requested happened 3 weeks later, at the next scheduled HOA board meeting, and I made sure every fine neighbor was there with their own documentation in hand. It took the board 40 minutes to unanimously vote to overturn every single fine Karen had issued in the past 2 years. Mine, Gerald's, Deborah's, the Ferreros. All of it, and to formally reprimand her for what the board's own language called unauthorized enforcement action outside the scope of recorded governing documents. 2 months later, in the next scheduled election, Karen didn't just lose the presidency, she didn't even run. Deborah took the seat instead, and one of her very first acts as president was drafting an actual, reasonable outdoor gathering policy. One that protects grills, protects noise until 10 p.m. and protects exactly 0 garden gnomes from Karen's opinion, because Karen's opinion was never a bylaw to begin with. The strange part is I never actually saw Karen move away. Her house just got quieter, week by week, blinds drawn earlier each evening, until one day there was a moving truck in her driveway and nobody in the neighborhood group chat even bothered to ask where she was going. We had our biggest barbecue of the year that following August. Not 15 people, not 20, closer to 50, spilling from my backyard into the Petersons' side lawn, kids running between 2 yards like the property line didn't even exist anymore. Gerald brought his own smoker just to help. Deborah brought a batch of her late husband's favorite lemonade recipe, wind chime hanging back up on her porch for the first time in 2 years. Karen's house stayed dark and quiet the entire evening. Nobody mentioned her name once. Nobody needed to. Here's what I keep coming back to months later, corn husks and all. The fight was never really about a grill. It was about whether a piece of paper with no legal weight behind it gets to run your life just because somebody says it loudly enough, often enough, with a clipboard in hand. It doesn't. It never did. All it takes is one person willing to actually read the documents everyone else was too tired or too intimidated to check. Rachel still has that little notebook, by the way, sitting in a kitchen drawer next to the coffee maker. We haven't needed it again. But every time a new family moves onto Larkspur Court, somebody always makes a point of mentioning it exists, half joke, half warning, and I think that's exactly the kind of neighborhood watch worth having. If you've ever had a Karen of your own, an HOA, a landlord, a boss, doesn't matter who, I'd genuinely love to hear that story in the comments below. Because I promise you someone reading this needed to hear that the paperwork usually isn't as powerful as the person waving it around. If this story got you the way it got me writing it, stick around and subscribe, because Larkspur Court isn't the only street with a Karen on it, and this definitely isn't the last story I've got.